Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Rolex Milgauss reference 116400GV. This watch is available from Chronex.com for €9,190. You can purchase the watch from Chronex.com online or alternatively in person at their boutiques. All their watches are Chronex certified original by their in-house watchmakers, and all their watches are covered by the Chronex 24-month warranty. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll show you the warranty card for the piece. So the Milgauss comes in this familiar cream coloured outer cardboard watch box. As you can see, it has the Rolex coronet embossed, which is very aesthetically pleasing. One removes the lid and I'll show you the watch box itself. So very aesthetically pleasing green, and it has a gold Rolex coronet embossed on the hinged lid. The interior is nicely upholstered with a cream velour fabric, and the watch sits on a padded pillow cushion as one would expect. Pulling down the flap reveals the warranty card. Now this is a January 2012 piece, so it has the earlier style of plastic warranty card. For security I've covered up the serial number, but you can see the reference number of the piece, 116400GV. So, although this is a January 2012 piece, it is unworn and in brand new condition, and it still has some of the protective films in place, which I'll show you. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Rolex Milgauss reference 116400GV. 40mm case diameter. It has a 48.9mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 13.1mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to the oyster clasp, and as you can see, the oyster clasp is beautifully signed with an embossed coronet. Flawless mirror polishing to the centre section of the oyster clasp, which contrasts beautifully with the brushed satin finish to the outer sections. That's also complemented by flawless mirror polishing to the flanks of the oyster clasp. As you can see, it still has the protective films from 2012 on the clasp and also on the flanks of the case, so it is a brand new condition, unworn piece despite being from 2012. Very unusual to get a piece of this age with the protective films still in place. So with regards to the rest of the specification, one of my favourite aspects of this Milgauss is it uses green sapphire crystal. As you can see, it's very aesthetically pleasing. I love the lip of the green sapphire crystal, the way it projects above the mirror polished bezel. It's just very beautiful the way it catches the light with a green tint to it. And also the green sapphire crystal does a very good job of tinting the applied indices and the silver baton hands with a green tone. It's just absolutely beautiful to look at. It's a unique characteristic of the Milgauss, the green sapphire crystal. They don't use it on any other Rolex piece. I like the symmetry of the applied indices, and I also like the contrast of the 9, 6 and 3 indices on the dial, because the tone of the lume used is orange rather than the more chromolites colour of white or green on the other applied indices. So that's a characteristic of the Milgauss. They've got the balance just right, with the orange lightning bolt second hand complementing the 9, 6 and 3 orange applied indices, and also Milgauss's orange on the dial. So it adds interest to the piece without being ostentatious or vulgar. It's a very well executed piece. The crown is coin edge finished, signed with the Rolex coronet, and it has a line underneath the coronet which denotes it's a twin lock crown, providing an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters. So let's test the crown action. Absolutely silky smooth, as one would expect with a Rolex twin lock. I've referred to this in previous reviews, but I really regard Rolex screw down crowns to be the best in the world, both the twin lock and the trip lock crowns respectively. The thread action is just silky smooth. It's something that Rolex do very well. So it's got a characteristic pop. The winding stem is pushed out of the movement. It feels spring loaded, and that's a characteristic of the caliber 3131 used in this piece. In the first position, it's the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the caliber 3131 to its maximum 48 hours. It's an absolute pleasure to manually wind it. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. Pulling it out to the first click position is the time setting position, and as you can see, it's silky smooth. Feels very good to set the time. It's a very well executed crown. It has hacking. As you can see, I have now hacked the movement and stopped the lightning bolt second hand dead. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. So I'll just test screwing it back down again. Immediate pickup between the internal thread of the solid oyster steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. Just beautiful. The threading on this twin lock crown is just sublime. It cannot be improved upon. It is perfection. Another thing I like about this is the mirror polished flat profile to the bezel, and it complements the mirror polishing to the tops of the lugs and the mirror polishing to the flanks of the case. So it's a really nice piece, and I actually prefer it aesthetically to a Rolex Explorer, because the mirror polishing really does give it a more dress watch appeal rather than the Explorer, which has a tool watch aesthetic. Now, with regards to the case back, unusually for Rolex, it is partially decorated. If you look at the circumference to the screw down case back, you can see they have engraved it with Rolex Oyster, and it also says Milgauss. So that is quite unusual, because usually Rolex case backs are completely sterile without any laser etching or engraving, and it does add interest to it. The solid oyster steel case back provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters, as does the screw down crown. Beneath the screw down case back is a cage which encompasses the movement, and that cage protects the movement from magnetic fields, hence the name Milgauss. And I'm pleased to report that this watch is resistant to 1000 Gauss, so it's a highly anti-magnetic piece. Now, with regards to the heft, it's 154 grams, which is very good for a 40mm. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I consider circa 150 grams to be the sweet spot. It gives a nice feeling of wrist presence, but it's also highly comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day as a daily wear piece. 13.1mm is also relatively low profile, and therefore it will easily slip underneath the shirt cuff if you wear business shirts, so an ideal daily wear piece. Now, unfortunately, I can't give you wrist shots because this bracelet has been sized for a smaller wrist and I can't get it over my hand. So that's a shame, but we'll move on to the Lume test and we'll see how it performs when it's charged up to its absolute maximum. So an interesting feature of the Milgauss is it uses Rolex chromalights, but it uses two different colour tones. And that is very unusual for Rolex, because they usually just use blue chromalights on all their watches. The Milgauss is unusual in that it uses two different colours of chromalight, as I'll show you on the indices. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. Incredibly bright. It's just an absolute pleasure to look at. Perfect symmetry of the applied indices. The only index absent on the dial is the 12 o'clock index due to the applied silver coronet. The baton style hands also have good lume plots, and as you can see, if you look closely at the 9, 6 and 3 applied indices, they are a slightly different tone. They look more blue tone compared to the green tone of the other applied indices. So it's a very interesting symmetrical dial, because with the green tint of the sapphire crystal, it does change the colour of the chromalite. It looks more green tone, rather like C3 superluminova rather than blue chromalite. It's glowing very brightly, and it's continuing to glow for a good length of time, as one would expect. It really is the very best of Swiss lume. Chromalights cannot be beaten. It's the ultimate, and it's absolutely gorgeous to look at. Right, so let's discuss the movement used, because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. The caliber 3131 is a reliable, well-proven movement. It's one of the greatest Rolex movements used. It has 31 joules, and it runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which are used for complications, and like the watch itself, it is highly anti-magnetic. It's paramagnetic with the parachrome blue hairspring, and the stated accuracy is -2 to +2 seconds per day. It has a 48-hour power reserve, which is perfectly acceptable, and the caliber 3131 really is one of Rolex's most reliable movements. It's a very accurate movement, but also very reliable. So, are there any negatives to the piece? Well, the one thing I dislike about it is the use of the oyster clasp. Personally, I would prefer to see a glide lock clasp on this piece, and that would allow for more fine-tuning on the adjustment of the bracelet. It does, however, have a 5mm EasyLink extension. As you can see, I've now deployed it. It's got a good positive click to the EasyLink extension. It clicks into the body of the clasp, and it has a good reassuring out click when one deploys it. So the EasyLink extension provides 5mm and it does work very well, although I personally think it's no substitute for the glide lock used on the Submariner and Submariner dates respectively. I would like to see Rolex introduce the glide lock clasp on all their pieces, including the Milgauss. As you can see, the interior of the Oyster clasp is finished to perfection, flawless mirror polishing to the top side, underside and flanks, and this still has the protective films on it from the Rolex factory. Beautifully laser engraved, as you can see. Absolute pleasure to look at. So the Oyster clasp is finished to perfection, but I personally think that the glide lock clasp would be an enhancement. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So €9,190, that is the price point of this Milgauss. Yes, I consider it to be excellent quality, and yes, I consider it to be excellent value. However, consider it uses the caliber 3131, and that has a 48-hour power reserve. It may be the case that if you're looking for a daily wear piece to wear in rotation, you want greater power reserve, and for that reason I would say also consider the Oyster Perpetual 41, which uses the caliber 3230, because that has a 70-hour power reserve. Really, I think it's time for Rolex to update the movement used in the Milgauss. Although the caliber 3131 is a reliable, well-proven, accurate movement, the caliber 3230 used in the Oyster Perpetual 41 has an improved chronology, it's more efficient, and it has a 70-hour power reserve versus the 48-hour power reserve of the caliber 3131 used in the Milgauss. So that's something to consider, the power reserve being 48 hours, but however, if you're going to wear it as a daily wear piece, that is perfectly acceptable. So I like it, and I'm going to highly recommend it to you for your consideration. I hope you've liked my review of the Rolex Milgauss reference 116400GV. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.